The Power of Habit: Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business by Charles Duhigg. Note 1. Habits are powerful. In his book, Charles Duhigg dives into our everyday lives to illustrate how habits work and control everything that we do. This book acts as a guide to learning how to control your impulses and define your willpower. Whether you want to take down an old habit or reinforce a new one, you must first determine what it is that makes you tick. Once you are able to understand how habits form and how they operate, you are able to uncover your ability to take control of your subconscious and create the life you want. If you've ever decided to stop a bad habit or start a good one, you may have been successful for a couple of days until your craving got in the way. Whether your goal was to stop smoking, start going to the gym, or stop eating junk food, in understanding how to control your habits, you can also learn how to control your thoughts, develop willpower, and truly combat the things in life that are holding you back. Note 2. What exactly is a habit? Simply put, a habit is a repetitive action or practice that's hard to quit or give up. Although that seems easy enough to understand, Duhigg breaks it down for us in a way that is more detailed. Duhigg breaks habits into 3 subcategories, or loops, each of which has its own distinct properties. These loops include cue, routine, and reward. 1. Cue. Think of a cue as a trigger to what happens next. It's what tells your brain which habitual routine to perform in response to an action or situation. Without the cue, no action would be performed and there wouldn't be a habit to begin with. For instance, if we were to use brushing your teeth as the habit, the cue may be getting ready for bed. 2. Routine. The routine is the action you automatically begin performing once prompted by the cue. In the example, the routine may begin with putting toothpaste on your toothbrush and then actually brushing your teeth. 3. Reward. Finally, the reward is what you receive as compensation for performing the action. The reward here would be smooth teeth and a clean mouth in the short term, or if we look more long term, it may be no cavities and money saved. Our daily habits are typically prompted by a conscious decision, which can then lead us into the loop. The difference between an action and a habit is that once a decision has been made from the cue, the subconscious takes over and so begins the infamous loop. Because of our body's ability to go into this autopilot mode, so to speak, habits can be inherently good or bad. Note 3. Cravings are powerful types of habits. Now that we have established a clear understanding of what a habit is and developed a baseline knowledge of how they work, we can begin to examine the fallout of habits and how they control our lives entirely. A craving is a powerful type of habit, and it's no secret that cravings can be nearly impossible to control. Everything from dieting to credit cards and all of those things in between have their little ways of controlling you whether you realize it or not. This realization is not only frustrating, but can go so far as to be debilitating under the right circumstances. The reason cravings are so dangerous is because they invoke anticipation of the reward at or even before the first thought of the cue. Our subconscious reacts to the thought of the desired reward, which leads to the negative loop. This intense form of habit doesn't necessarily need the typical cue, but can instead be triggered by a similar cue due to its association with the normal cue or the reward. Duhigg goes on to explain how the physical reward of most cravings is rather short-lived. Because of this, it isn't the physical reward that we crave. Rather, it's the mental reward of satisfaction that keeps us wanting more. Knowing how much enjoyment we get from the short-lived reward induces thoughts of the reward, and so comes the cue. Once a craving becomes strong enough, it may become a dangerous habit in the form of addiction. This inability to control things oftentimes may lead to extreme consequences such as depression, anxiety, and other overwhelming emotions. Understandably, habits can become hazardous to our well-being, but having a bad habit is far from the end of the road if we can learn to control them. Note 4. How to regain control. Naturally, we all lose control of something at one point or another, and no thanks to habits and the excuses they create space for, it can be unbelievably difficult to regain that control. However, with our ability to lose control comes equally ample opportunity to regain control of a situation. We are bombarded with millions of stimuli each and every day. With all of these things competing for our attention, it's unrealistic to believe we can respond to everything we are presented with. Thankfully, we are able to delegate a large majority of our responses to our subconscious. Now that we've done this, we are free to focus on the more important tasks at hand. The first step to regaining control is identifying the rewards you crave and the cues that trigger your response. Try writing down what rewards you seek out throughout the day. You can then add to them by making note of what cues act as temptation. You know the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Well, similarly, it isn't easy to break an old habit. Yes, this is going to be tough, and yes, you will likely slip up a time or two. That does not make the task impossible by any means. One option is to form a new routine by responding to the cue differently. To do this, you'll have to isolate the cue. Take note of where you are, what you're doing, and what's happening around you when you feel the sudden urge to respond to the loop. From this, you can determine the cue and change how you react, thereby changing your routine. Alternatively, if you are unable to change your response, you may be able to disregard the cue entirely. Another tool to keep in your arsenal is eliminating cues. While this certainly sounds like a hard task, it may not be as tough as you imagine. If you have a habit of scrolling through Facebook all day at work, you can block the website from your work computer and/or delete the app from your phone. This way, even if the thought crosses your mind, you've eliminated your ability to follow through with the action, thereby forcing you to break the habit. Note 5. Out with the old. When you want to develop a new habit, you have to continuously reinforce that new routine. Similarly, when you want to get rid of an old, bad habit, you must do the same. Duhigg introduces the reader to a few tricks, one of which he calls golden rule. He states that if you want to change a habit, the only thing you should do is to switch up your routine. For example, let's say Sally has a bad habit of biting her nails. This is entirely subconscious, as she generally doesn't even realize she's doing it until she's already been biting for a minute or two. If the habit is biting your nails, the cue here may be a stressful situation, anxiety, or even boredom. But for the sake of this example, let's go with stress. Now that we've determined the issue and what causes it, we have to reinforce a new routine. So whenever Sally catches herself biting, she has decided to squeeze a stress ball. Once she does this enough times, it will become her body's physical response to stress. In order to get rid of whatever awful habit it is you've been dragging around, try to follow a similar model. Note 6. In with the new. Just as discussed with getting rid of an old habit, in order to develop a new one, it's all about reinforcement. Perhaps the most challenging part of creating any habit, whether it's changing an old one or forming a new one, is having the willpower to perform the routine itself. You have a limited amount of willpower at your disposal, and if you aren't careful, you may end up wasting it on something else. Luckily, there is a strategy for this too. Here are 3 ways to increase the amount of willpower you possess. 1. Develop discipline. One way to do this is to create an opportunity to practice delayed gratification. This will allow you to stop depending on the reward in order to take action and do something. 2. Plan ahead. If you prepare for the outcome of a particular situation being the worst-case scenario, then anything else will suffice as an alternative reward. However, that's not to say you should always think in those terms, as that may lead to a negative mindset on reinforcing habits. 3. Autonomy. When we are forced to complete a task by someone else's request, our desire to do said task is generally much less than if it was something we wanted to do for ourselves. This can lead to procrastination and cause a decrease in discipline. So don't be afraid to do something just because you want to. It may end up being beneficial for you in the end. With a newfound sense of discipline, creating a routine and sticking to it becomes a much simpler task. Note 7. Rewards have more power than you think. We know that the reward is usually the motivation behind any habit. So when trying to change a habit, a helpful step may be to switch up the reward. If you want to stop snacking late at night, it's possible that your brain is looking for something to do rather than looking for something to eat. If you can determine what it is you're feeling when you reach for that bag of chips, You can understand what sort of fulfillment you are actually searching for. Try adjusting your response and then wait to see if you've satisfied the craving. For instance, cleaning for 5 minutes instead of eating a snack. Again, wait for that delayed gratification. If you notice a sense of fulfillment, then you've found what reward you're really looking for. If that doesn't work, try again. Keep at it until you are able to figure out what it is that you want, and you will be able to change the habit. Likewise, try rewarding yourself in smaller increments. Instead of holding the bag of chips, try limiting yourself to a bowl or a cup. Soon enough, the reward may be something entirely different. Note 8, conclusion. When we form a habit, we give it control. When we break a habit, we take away that same control we once gave to it. Habits can be extremely rewarding or extremely distracting. Whether building or breaking, we have to remember to remain patient. Putting a deadline on changing only creates unwanted pressure and stress. This is likely to cause a relapse, decreasing your willpower and determination all around. Along with that, trying to change up any set routine is going to create some amount of stress to your mental or physical state. Not only do you have to be strong and determined during these times, but you must also be patient with yourself. With these steps, you can change more than just your daily habits. You can change the way you operate in your personal life as well as your professional life. You can create a more productive version of yourself, and along with that, a happier version. It's time to stop allowing your habits, or lack thereof, to control you and take back your life.